Un, dos, tres. Un, dos, tres. Un, ya. Uno. Rafa, ¿me escuchas? Un, dos, tres. Uno, dos, tres. Ahí igual está llegando, pero acá no te marca. Sí, perfecto. Necesito que confirme con la oficina si me están escuchando, porque no voy a poder hacer pruebas después porque está llegando la gente. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Estoy hablando por la cabina. ¿Me escuchan en este momento, no? Ya, perfecto. ¿Sigue el ruido? Ya. Espérame.
¿Tiene ruido? Sí, hay un fondito de ruido.
Ya, 1, 2, 3. ¿Me escuchas? ¿Sigue con ruido? Tengo muteado mi teléfono ahora. 1, 2, 3, 4. ¿Está mejor ahora? Ya, perfecto. Ya, perfecto.
Prendió el micrófono.
Muy buenos días.
Good morning, everyone. Our warm greetings and gratitude for attending this press conference to launch the report 2019 preliminary overview of the economies of Latin America and the Caribbean. We would like to greet the journalists who are here at our head office in Santiago de Chile, as well as our colleagues who are following us from around the region, especially our sub-regional offices, and also our greetings to everyone following the presentation of this report through web streaming, the YouTube channel of the ECLAC Conference Services. This will be headed by the Executive Secretary of ECLAC, Alicia Bárcena, and also here on this occasion is the Executive Secretary, the standing Executive Secretary, Mr. Tilleman, Mr. in charge of the Economic Development, Mr. Mario Chile, and the head of the Development Funding, Esteban Perez, and the head of the Studies Unit, Unemployment, Pedro Welber, and Mr. Perez, and our Economic Officers, Cecilia Vera and Ramon Financiera. And of course, our executive joint secretary, executive secretary, Mr. Manchaca is here. Alisa Bárcena, the floor is yours. Thank you. The floor Good morning, and once again, I would like to especially thank the Division of Economic Development that has done such a good job in record time to present to you the preliminary overview at the end of the year in terms of the economies. And we would also like to thank the Publications Division that has done a great effort to have all this ready on time. So thank you all very much. And we will immediately move on to the balance. In fact, this balance is showing a particularly complex context because in the region we're seeing a widespread and synchronized economic slowdown at country level as well as sector level. Second, domestic demand is slowing, accompanied by a low aggregate demand and with each time more fragile international financial markets. To this we must add the increasing and urgent social demands that have put in great pressure on the inclusion of doing social inclusion. And the truth is that the region cannot put up with adjustment policies and really needs policies to stimulate growth and reduce inequality. And so now we're going to see what is happening in the international context. We see three signs of stagnation and uncertainty. First, the world economy is growing at the lowest rate since the global financial crisis, and by 2020, no significant improvements are expected. Second, world trade is weakening each time more, and this is in the midst of major trade and technological tensions. And third, financial vulnerabilities are sharpening. And so, as we were saying, the world economy is growing at the lowest rate, and here we can see clearly how the world, in fact, remains at 2.5 in 2019 and 2020, but drops from 3.1. So all economies, the developed as also fall, and this year they're expecting 1.7, next 1.5, and the U.S. that had the greatest expansion of the last decade. In fact, also the USA is expecting a lower growth this year and even lower in 2020. And Japan, in fact, the UK, Eurozone, and the only economies that are picking up cyclically are the emerging ones. They slow in 2019 and then come back in 2020. In the case of emerging Asia, in the case of China is of concern to us because China is falling from 6.6 to 6.1 and slows 5.8 to 5.8 for next year. So it's not expected that China, being one of the most important trade partners in the region, may have a better performance. And the same thing in the case of India. There too, it slows in 2019, but then comes back in 2020. And this same occurs in emerging Europe, in the East, and in sub-Saharan Africa, which may be the economies that are growing and that maybe are driving the growth of emerging economies. But to us, what we are interested in as a region, in fact, is China, what's happening with China and the U.S. These are perhaps the two most important trade partners for us. And perhaps one of the most important topics, and this is the second sign of stagnation worldwide, is in fact the weakening of trade. Please take a look on how trade came to 3.4 in 2018, and this is a major fall towards 2019 from January through September from minus 0.4%. So in fact, trade that has always been the main driver of world growth is in serious difficulties, and also is the first time that the trade volume is negative since the world financial crisis. And also we have in front of us the fall of international prices, that is, of raw materials above all, as we will see later on. The other major topic, and that leads to great financial vulnerability, is that the financial world is expanding. Please take a look at global debt. Global debt has increased at an expansion rate even greater than world GDP, with levels of global debt reaching historical highs. I think it was 320 percent of GDP. That is the size of global debt. And we can see that interest rates, on the other hand, are falling. And so, in conclusion, what this is saying is that the financial world is expanding, yes, but not the real economy. And that is a difficulty because we have a world that is each day more driven by financial returns, and we have such low interest rates that today there is a search for returns in areas of far higher risk. For example, pension funds and so on are looking for returns in dimensions that imply high risk. And also, debt has increased at a rate higher than GDP and increases for the whole world, all sectors, households, governments, corporate, financial, and non-financial sectors. And I think that this is one of the major topics of the situation today that is affecting us severely. And also, in 2019, there is a drop of 5.4 in primary commodities, and this will continue to 1.9, the fall in prices. And here we can see how energy has dropped, and energy goes in blue, farming in red, and metals in green. And of course, this has a major impact in a region such as ours that is so sensitive, so to speak, on account of its exports as well as its imports. 5 signs of warning in the region of Latin America and the Caribbean. The first sign is that this is the 6th year of low growth for the region. That is, we've been for 6 years, and if we continue along this trend by 2020, it will be 7 years of low growth. And I believe that this is one of the things that are of greatest concern. GDP per capita has contracted 4% from 2014 to 2019. And perhaps this is the most delicate aspect of this economic moment that the region is going through. And slowdown becomes widespread. 18 out of the 20 countries of Latin America and 23 of the 33 countries of the entire region, including the Caribbean, that slow in synchrony. And encompasses more sectors, also a matter of concern. Lower trade volumes and the terms of trade are less favorable. The fourth thing is that domestic aggregate demand weakens. That is, domestic consumption. Consumption and investment contract or slow, and there is a low contribution by public spending to growth. And in addition to reducing domestic loans. And what we're seeing in Chile and the entire region, that inequality has come out as the heart of social disenchantment, and that it infringes on growth. And this is because over the years, this has brought us to a deterioration of employment, insufficient income, and we have no universal provision of public services and very low social protection. Externally, since there is prices are lower for commodities, we're going to see that the terms of trade, in fact, have deteriorated, and especially in those exporting hydrocarbons and mining produce. Mexico is one of those most affected because of their exporting portfolio, and Latin America in general has deteriorated from 2018 through 2019 of the terms of trade. And Central America defends itself, and agro-business exporters do have an outlet with soybean, and Brazil remains positive, and the Caribbean. But the Latin American average is a deterioration of the terms of trade.
And there is a slowdown of external demand. Our trade partners that are in deceleration, like China and the U.S. and other partners, have led to lower dynamism in the volume of exports in such a way that, look, between 2018 and 2019, really, actually, we have much less export volume from 2.6 to 0.6. And the GDP growth of our trade partners, here you can see it on this line, also is in open deceleration. So the outlook, the prospect is not that encouraging. And the same thing with imports. Imports are very relevant. This significant drop between 6.5 to minus 0.9, you see they are very much related to imports of capital goods for investments or consumption of imported goods. And so the region is facing a situation that is cumbersome, it's complex, and the region has defended insofar as current account deficit. It has been kept stable, minus 2% of GDP. But what's most impacted is that there has been a reduction of income insofar as foreign direct investments. This income balance is the one that has been most affected, most impacted. The service balance is negative. What helps a bit is that of goods, precisely exports or net exports, and of course remittances. What really allows to compensate for or really maintain this level of current account is remittances. And as you well know, remittances, they increase 7.6 billion, but they reach out to certain countries, mainly Central American countries and Mexico, and not so very much to South America. So here we have examined and conclude that in the first semester of this year, 18 of the 20 Latin American economies have undergone an important slowdown. Two exceptions, Guatemala and Colombia. The rest of the economies, the 18, have really slowed down in this first semester. And there are very concrete items or points where this drop has been most significant in the region. That's the blue line. And the blue line in 2017. And another point, another time, is at the end of 2018, where you can see a significant drop. Mexico, that had performed differently from South America, is also, or they have an encounter point in 2017 in this synchronized deceleration, and they will once again in 2019 meet in this slowdown. So it is a region that is in a situation of low growth and stagnation. And low growth, I mean export, gross exports. This one is the only demand component that really contributes to growth. In investment, you can see it's negative. Private consumption, that had also been an important factor as a driver of growth in previous years, you can see it's openly going down. And public consumption or public investment has not been able to resume growth. So all these are the components of domestic demand. And the other issue that CEPAL has always brought to the table is that of investment. Investment has weakened between 2014 and 2019. There has been a drop of minus 2.4 percentage points from 20.5 to 18.1. And therefore, here we see that we have been unable to really stabilize investment. And those countries that really have maintained the investment, like Colombia, we see that it is a country that has been able to defend its level, given that the investment levels have been quite significant. Unemployment. Unemployment is another major issue. We had always shown the urban unemployment rate, the orange bars, is the one we had presented historically to you. And now what we've done now is to measure national unemployment, the same way that ILO does it. And we see that national unemployment increases from 8 to 8.2%, and the number of unemployed persons went up in 1 million people. We have reached a maximum unemployment rate of 25.2 million persons. This is the most troublesome part of what is happening in the economy. And also, on the other hand, the quality of employment has been undermined in most of the countries. Independent labor expands more than the salary work. It's 3% goes up versus 1.5 of the salary jobs. And also labor informality also increases in a widespread manner. That is, those seeking jobs, employment, either hourly, half hourly, or half a day, all that has improved significantly. And the hourly unemployment rate has increased in almost all countries, that of self-employed workers. And we've seen some exceptions, of course, but Peru is an exception. But the interannual underemployment rate, or the outlier here is Dominican Republic, and this, in fact, here, Dominican Republic, there is more formal employment. That's the outlier. And fiscal and monetary policies, financial policies, first and foremost, we see the stagnation of fiscal or tax income. In Latin America, the average stalls at 18.1. But we need to say this. These returns have been stable in spite of deceleration because of the tax reforms in the region that in some way were able to achieve or maintain this tax income with certain stability. But what we see here with great concern is that all these other income not necessarily continue to increase. And it is urgent, therefore, to move forward in progressive taxation. That is, it's urgent to continue increasing taxation. It's quite concerning, this, especially in South America. If we see South America, where we find more relevant problems, because income begin to decline, whilst the Caribbean on its side has had an increase of its income. And of course, this limits the possibility of expanding expenditure. And spending has decreased in Latin America. Primary current spending from 15.3 to 15.2. And what has increased is interest payment from 2.5 to 2.6. And capital expenditure or investment continues to go down. I would say this is the most concerning snapshot, because we are moving to a lower primary spending. Interest payments increased. Look at the case of South America, where we are from 17.7 to 17.4 in primary spending, and interest payment costs are quite significant for this part of the world. So reduction or the drop in current spending is really a warning, in that social spending can be penalized when it's most needed in this region. And the last point, or rather the other topic of great concern in the fiscal environment, is a higher public indebtedness that has not translated into more public investment. Capital spending, where it is truly investment, look how investment goes down. And on the other hand, interest payments go up. So this means that there is an adjustment variable, which has been the capital expenditure, and greater debt, greater indebtedness, and debt has not gone down, or rather, it has not translated into higher investments or higher growth. And the region continues in the process of fiscal consolidation to reduce the deficit. The deficit has improved from -0.4 to -0.2, but the total spending is maintained equal 20.9%. But what has declined significantly or clearly is the primary spending. And the difference is precisely in this total spending, and that is the interest payment. So the region is paying interests from its public treasury and has not been able to turn it into greater growth. The Caribbean, on the other hand, has had important, significant improvements. Caribbean has made important efforts, even it is in a surplus, and has increased total income with primary spending a bit higher, and the total expenditure. Of course, it also has an important burden in interest payment, but the Caribbean is a region with very important efforts. So as we said, in spite of fiscal consolidation, the public debt continues rising and investment going down. Here, public debt of central government increased from 41.9 to 43.2. 43.2 is the average of the region. But the most indebted country, evidently Argentina, 87.7 or 78.7, I'm sorry. But then we have Costa Rica, Colombia, Honduras, until you get to countries below the average, among them Chile, that has an indebtedness level of 25.9, if I'm seeing correctly.
And as we were saying, the Caribbean has reached high primary surpluses and reducing public debt from 71.7 to 69 points. And here we see that the most indebted country previously was Jamaica, but it's now Barbados. Jamaica's made tremendous efforts to reduce their debt level, and based on major adjustments, without a doubt. But the results have been achieved in terms of reducing gross public debt. And then, on the monetary side, we must say that the good news in the region, despite so many bad news, but we do have one good, and that is that inflation is at historically low levels and with a downward trend. Now, of course, here we're speaking about Latin America, of course, the green bars, not including Argentina, Haiti, and Venezuela, because those three countries are going through a very different inflationary situation in comparison to the rest of the region. South America, without Argentina and Venezuela, has been able to significantly control their inflation, which is the blue line here. And Central America and Mexico, excluding Haiti, have also been able to significantly reduce inflation. So inflation in most countries of the region is not an issue. And this opens certain options in terms of monetary policy and fiscal policies as well. But above all, we see that there is a significant control of inflation in the region, which means that there is more space for an expansive monetary policy in most of the economies of the region. Policy rates, that is, those countries that are able to reduce their interest rates have done so. These here, basically. Mexico is the one that's reduced it least of all. They always reduce it in sync with the U.S. Fed, but all other countries that have the policy instrument in their hands, they've reduced the interest rates. The monetary base, the countries with the monetary base have precisely increased the monetary base, so that based on increasing the monetary base or currency liquidity, this may lead to a reduction in interest rates. But in general, what is done is that this allows an expansive policy to see if this can dynamize domestic demand. Now, this expansive policy has been supplemented by the greater use of international reserves to attenuate exchange volatility, as Chile has just done recently to bring down the depreciation of its currency. Now, this reduction in reserves in absolute terms, in millions of dollars, has not had an impact on the level of reserves in terms of a percentage of GDP. We're still at a rate of reserves very similar to 2018 and very similar also to 2016. But yes, from the viewpoint of millions of dollars, there has been a reduction in reserves, but not so much as to be specifically concerned over this. Now, projections. What do projections say with regard to 2019? First, the region is going to slow up down as far as 0.1% growth. I think we had estimated 0.5, but now we had to review these forecasts and down to 0.1 growth. And here we would like to highlight the number of countries that have a growth of under 1% in 2019. 14 countries of the region have grown below 1%, which is the highest level in recent years. And I believe that that is what really matters, that the region is deteriorating in zinc. There is a synchronization of growth deterioration. And of course, these economies that are most dynamic are Dominica after the earthquake, Antigua and Barbuda after the hurricane, she corrects herself. The Dominican Republic remains the same as Colombia with high levels of investment. Guyana with these very important oil reserves found. Panama has always been pretty dynamic, although it has brought its growth down significantly. And so we go with the Caribbean and Central American economies. Central America is going to have a 2.4% growth forecast, and then moving towards the other. Well, there's a mix. We cannot really speak of sub-regions here, but really, this is a combination of reasons why, well, Central America, yes, 2.4, and then we're going to the Caribbean, 1.4. Central America with Mexico, 0.5. Mexico is an economy that does not grow this year. It's at 0, same as Barbados. And then we see that in the case of South America, which is minus 0.1, that is, South America is once again moving into a negative rate. And of course, there we find that Ecuador, Haiti, Argentina, Nicaragua, and Venezuela are the economies that have negative growth. For 2020, of course, we are a bit more optimistic, but very low levels of growth continue, 1.3%. And of course, we see here once again Guyana, which is the country that most bounces back on account of the oil. Also the Caribbean with 5.6, driven to a great extent by Guyana, and then we see Central America, 2.6, not too different to the 2.4 of the previous year. And here, Central America and Mexico with 1.6, a little better off because it's expected that Mexico will have a better performance in 2020. And then we have the case of South America with 1.2, where it's expected that Brazil will have a better performance and Ecuador will no longer be in the negative, and then Chile, well, is going to be a punished economy this year and the next, but with a better outlook. And so here, Brazil 1.7 and Mexico 1.3. These are major and relevant economies. And then Argentina, that will have a drop, not as much as this year, but 1.3. Now, I believe that this is one of the graphs that I would like to dwell on a bit longer. because what I would like to pass on to you is that from the viewpoint of ECLAC, what's important is to review the growth trend in the region since 1951. Please note that the region from 1951 through 1977, so to speak, had an average growth of 5.6%. This was a time called import substitutions. This period was maybe the time when most of the economies were able to be industrialized, especially in South America, and achieved growth levels that were very relevant. Now, when the debt issue began in 1980, 1979, the debt crisis and the Washington Consensus, that is when the region began having a trajectory of far less growth. And we never exceeded 2.5% average growth. And so, in many occasions, we did not, well, in some points, yes, we did achieve certain levels, but here we're talking about averages for these years. And then, of course, with the commodity boom, the region once again bounced back to 4%, but we're unable to keep that. Please take it the tremendous drop, and here I would like to emphasize 2014, because 2014 is showing that in these last 7 years, 2014 through 2020, the rate of growth will be 0.5%, the lowest rate that we've ever had over the last 7 decades. This is the lowest rate of the last 70 years. 7 decades, I correct. And the policy recommendations are that this low growth trend in the region, in fact, as we were seeing in the previous graph, is a trend that is related to structural restrictions, limitations, reprimarization, lack of productivity, not being able to overcome specific goods for exports, our way of inserting them, and an external demand that is on the downward trend. But one thing is the domestic situation in our economies, and externally not very encouraging either. But we must say it, if we move back to the previous diagram, what does this show? This shows that the capacity is there. There is an idle capacity here. That this very low performance means a high level of idle capacity. We must put that in motion, this idle capacity in the region. And so in the short term, what's needed is significant fiscal stimuli, not adjustments, but significant fiscal stimuli, obviously accompanied by fiscal sustainability policies. There's no doubt. It's not just a matter of stimuli without considering that it is necessary to maintain fiscal stability. This must be focused on increases in the tax burden, more progressive, and having structural reforms to the social protection systems. In fact, this is a really relevant matter. Social protection reforms are essential. For it is necessary to give priority to investment, and that makes a change in the productive structure. If we continue without assigning priority to investment in order to overcome primarization and reprimarization of the economies that we are trapped in, and of course changing the trade insertion or inclusion of the region. But we have to take a look at that variable investment, where we take a look at the performance of an economy, such as the economy, that it was able to do this, and that they're defending themselves because they have dedicated a major part of their policy to bolster investment. And then how to face the financial volatility and exchange volatility. So we must strengthen the real economy and strengthen the instruments for macroprudential economy. policy. We need to better regulate the financial flows. And that is, to a great extent, what the macroprudential policy is offering. So what are we talking about when we're talking about an active fiscal policy? Well, the idea is precisely to reactivate economic activity through greater public spending, investment, and social policy. We're giving you 3 examples here. Mexico, that has done things to support its economy, almost $25 billion. The national agreement in the private sector that has just been agreed on in the month of November for about $43 billion. And Chile, that has an employment protection plan and economic recovery for $5.5 billion in order to stabilize the economy, and a social agenda of $1.6 billion. So they had started with 1.2 and now they're at 1.6. And Colombia, that has a bill for growth with actions to protect the lower income and more vulnerable segment of the population. Argentina, I've not yet included it, but Argentina is precisely looking for a way to dynamize their growth based on employment, vulnerable employment. So how to relaunch an economy through care systems, SMEs, and I believe that that is what we could and should do in this region. There is no doubt that what we are saying here of increasing spending in the short term will lead to pressure on public levels of debt. Neither are we saying that all countries should take on debt, but we're saying that there are countries that can't do it, and this is the time to do it, and of course, based on the differentiated capacity of countries. And not all countries must do the same. Each country has a different space in order to carry out an active fiscal policy.
And this, of course, needs to go hand in hand with a strategy guaranteeing fiscal sustainability in the mid-run, in the medium term. But what we cannot forget is that growth and productivity are necessary conditions so as to maintain a sustainable ratio between debt and GDP. It's not adjustment. The adjustment will bring greater depression or deceleration. So growth and productivity. And secondly, and it has been proven in the region, that inequality is inefficient. And I rather disagree with the UNDP because it says beyond the income. Yes, income is key. It's fundamental. And in this region, there are insufficient, inadequate income to pay for private goods that have become private, like education and health. And therefore, income is an imperative for greater growth and productivity. How do we achieve all this? Only if we will conduct structural reforms, that is, dismantling the structure of privileges. I mean, the 1%, the top or richest 1%, tax on wealth, the one that has most to pay the highest rate. To reduce tax evasion in the region, it represents 6.3% of GDP. Tax evasion, and reassess tax spending that account for 3.7% of regional GDP. There are some reductions that need to be maintained, but really this has to be reassessed, because they account for 3.7% of GDP. And CEPAL is working on a new generation of taxes on digital economy, environment, and public health. And so now, to close, we are saying that we need a political economy of growth. where the role of the state is today more important than ever. The market on its own will not solve all the problems. We need a strong state. We need countries to revisit their models and toolkits, and that macroeconomic policy be better coordinated between central banks, fiscal policy, and financial authorities. Reality is moving them for greater coordination. And finally, this social pact calls for macro to participate in this social pact. Macroeconomy is not isolated, it's not in an ivory tower, as many would like to say. That macroeconomy there is responding rather to economic stability. No, macro needs to come in for stabilizing economy and to prioritize sustainable development policies. Macro needs to serve sustainable growth development. Thank you, and now we open for questions. Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. We will now begin this press conference. First, we will recognize the journalists that are here in our main venue in Santiago, and then we'll have another round with questions from the rest of the region. Please, colleagues that would like to raise your concerns, raise your hands. And you can please say your names and the media. There's some shyness this morning. No, thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon now. This is from the Xinhua Agency of China. What's the role of foreign investment in the region, Secretary? We understand that not only we need to resume the path to growth, but there is an expression on inequality. The foreign investment has played a role in the region, but should they go deeper in order to be in sync with what is happening in the social juncture here in the region? Could you repeat? My name is Cristobal Chavez from Xinhua Agency. Another question from the room? Please, could you answer? Thank you for the question. Yes, direct foreign investment plays a very important role. What does it seek, foreign direct investment? It seeks a market, usually. Second, competitiveness, or areas where it can be competitive. And thirdly, local capabilities or skills that may be attractive for them. So what is it that direct foreign investment is seeking in this region? Very often in South America, they are seeking extraction industries, minerals, natural resources. To move foreign investment from that point to a more sustainable investment, environmentally speaking, will depend on governments giving clear signs to direct foreign investment. And I'll give you the case of Chile, where direct foreign investment is moving on to renewable energies. Very clear signals were given, even from the previous government, where there was a target. A target was set of replacing carbon-based energy for renewable energies in a significant percentage, or coal-based to renewable energies. And so there is a very important signal, and direct foreign investment was attracted for renewable energy sector. I would say in the region, this country, Chile, is the one that has attracted foreign direct investment in this sector, renewable energy. If the country defines or gives clear signs of where the country wants to head to, then foreign direct investment will be knowledgeable of that. If the country does not define targets and it doesn't define if employment or if the natural resources will be devastated or not, well, there you have another situation. Yes, indeed, there are lower levels of foreign direct investment coming to the emerging world. Direct foreign investment started to move among developed countries to buy among themselves technology, especially China. But our region continues to be an attractive partner for direct foreign investment, not only in natural resources, which is very important, but it has to be in a way generating employment, leading to greater sustainability and development. So the role of direct foreign investment plays a key role. We had an analysis where $1 million in DFI in the extractive industry without added value generated one job. That same $1 million in another company, that could be mining company, but providing greater added value inside, it could even generate up to 6 or 7 jobs or employment. So those conditions for direct foreign investments have to be defined by the country. Thank you, Executive Secretary. Now, we'll have one first round of questions raised from Mexico. These are the questions. Colleague Susana Gonzalez from La Jornada. What possibilities of CEPAL says that the economic rates will improve in 2020? And what risks do you foresee for the country with the major social spending of this government? What is the balance of the first year of government of AMLO? And also asks about your opinion about the detention of Garcia Luna. Also from the austerity policy of the Mexican government applied by or implemented by the Mexican government could impact the economy of 2020. And based on the foreign trade treaty, could that affect the economy? Can we expect incentives for next year? Will it be an immediate external demand? And also with the question raised by Silvia Rodriguez from Millennial Group, all of them from Mexico, says CEPAL estimates that the growth of Mexico in 2019 was 0%. This means that Mexico was in a recession. This year, what is the outlook for 2020 for Mexico? What are the greater risks? And how do you assess the actions against corruption in this first year of the government? Several questions, 2 issues on Mexico. Yes, of course. What possibilities are viewed by CEPAL for the 2020 forecast to improve with the changes in the plans, and what risks for the major social spending? For 2020, we are foreseeing an increase of GDP of 1.3%, linked to an acceleration of public and private investment and to an increase of consumption, precisely because of this social spending. We believe there's going to be an increase in consumption. There was another important aspect in Mexico, which was the rise of real wages and, of course, minimum wages. We believe that the drive and the of TechMec is very important. It's an expected impulse. It is within the infrastructure plan that was announced in November. This infrastructure plan encompasses 15 projects, and the idea is that they take off right away, and with of an amount of 44 billion, and there are another 60 projects with an estimated investment of 158 billion pesos. Among these projects are the construction of roads, improvement of seaports, of telecommunications, the conclude or finish certain public works, expand others. So it's important to say that Mexico is in the midst of an economic restructuring process, one of political restructuring as well, expanding social spending to ensure rights and financing this higher social spending with savings and reallocation of items and lines of spending. This is very positive. Let us not lose sight of the fact that the per capita social spending and as a GDP percentage is very much below the average of Latin America and of OECD. So anything that goes or trying to level the field in Mexico with a per capita spending and an increase of GDP is important. And especially this is a spending that has lagged behind if we take into account the magnitude, the size of the Mexican economy. Another relevant point is that an oil field in Tabasco has just been discovered, and that is giving very relevant signals. And as energy policies have been reformed, inviting the private sector to participate, so this discovery of the oil field can be of great relevance for the Mexican economy. Second question says, austerity policy applied by the Mexican government, could this impact the economy on 2020? Well, as I was saying, we are forecasting 1.3 growth. A growth of 1.3%. And the austerity policy has been one of reallocation of resources, rather, where, of course, resources have been cut down in certain lines or certain areas, but there has been a reallocation of public investment, an increase in minimum wages, and some social programs also of great importance. Now, the Minister of Finance says that when promoting the TechMec, will there be more investment? Yes, of course. We believe that at beginning of 2020, it's possible that the treaty, TechMec, will have been approved by the different congresses or parliaments. An addendum was signed for the TechMec in Mexico, dealing mainly with environment and labor issues. But we see that TechMec, can send very positive signs to the world, to the region, and we believe that that can be of relevance. What's our assessment regarding actions against corruption and the fact that Garcia Luna was detained or in prison? I cannot have a say on that. It's not my area of expertise. I think fighting corruption is a very good news. And issues of security are issues that will need to be approached from a different prospect, which is not ours. Is Mexico in recession or was in recession in 2019? CEPAL believes that there will be a 0% growth in 2019. So we need to revise our forecast, which was 0.2. This revision is very consistent with what INEGI has published on November 25 and yesterday also, speaking about economic evolution of the first 2 quarters of the year. Our estimate of the fourth quarter contemplates a small, minor, but positive growth. Therefore, we don't think that the Mexican economy is in recession because of this fourth quarter that's going to be positive. So with that, I think I answered the questions from Mexico. And what's important is to say that we expect that the budget for 2020 will support reactivation is one of 6 billion pesos, which is 4.5 more than what it had in 2019. It's an increase of 8.8% for Pemex, and because of these oil fields, new oil fields, it's going to be very good news. So I think there will be greater stability in 2020. And this infrastructure plan announced by the government is also something extremely positive. Thank you, Executive Secretary. In the room, do we have another question? Yes, we have one. Yes. Andrea González Villablanca, journalist. I would like to follow with that question of weakened investment and the specific case of Chile. After closing several SMEs, and this will grow throughout the year, also the cancellation of the APEC conference that was very important on this. I want to know if the countries in the region and other investors have lost confidence, has lost trust in the country, and will stop investing, or what is it that you have perceived along those lines, especially because of what we are going through at this time? Thank you. And this is also a question from Margarita Bastida from the Italian news agency ANSA, asking, where is the greater indebtedness going to end if there hasn't been greater public investment nor growth? What is the destination? What is the where is this greater debt going to? And with that, that's the question from the Italian news agency. Where has the indebtedness landed? I will ask Daniel to answer, really, because I would like to refer to your question insofar as losing confidence on the part of investors. I don't think so. I think it will all depend on the response or answer. Yes, there is social concern throughout the whole region, indeed. And it's inequality that stands out. But I understand that CEPAL and countries to adopt actions. Chile itself is already acting vis-a-vis this problem with the social package. Perhaps insufficient so far, but I think that Chile is one of the countries that has fiscal savings. It has ability for debt, so as to give you a strong, so as to have a major response to this social unrest. And our region continues to be attractive for foreign investment because we have resources, because there are skills or stability, really. If we see this in terms of other regions or compared to other regions in the world, this one in some way offers really, I mean, we need to improve, of course, a rule of law that needs to be improved, but it does provide and offer stability conditions. We are going through poor times. I mean, very bad times in the region. We cannot deny that.
The worst performance of the last 70 years is really to wonder how we've been unable to resolve such ingrained structural issues. So we need to talk to investors so that they should come to not only make money, but also to support the more integral development of the countries that they are coming to invest in. because European investment in this region is one of the largest in the world. So I do not think that that wealth of European investment is going to be lost. On the contrary, it should be encouraged. And I think that Europe is into that, thinking of how to relate to Latin America once again in a far more creative fashion. The Mercosur-Europe agreement is an example of this. And so, yes, I do believe that there is trust. And China is also taking a look at our content. But the interesting thing is that we should also be clear as to what we want in order to direct, and that the states and governments may better direct those investments in order to resolve growth, yes, but also inequality and environmental sustainability. 3 things. Daniel. Yes, thank you, Executive Secretary. And now, regarding the question on the relationship between debt and investment, or where debt has gone, yes, as the Executive Secretary said during her presentation, unfortunately, there is an uncoupling between the rise in debt and the dynamics of investment. And if you take a look at the region in general, and in the case of Chile, the debt has increased, and this has not reflected in a greater investment. This is a matter of concern that ECLAC has been talking about for some time, because we would like debt to be essentially to finance better investment, which is the best way of paying back the debt. Now, we should also recall that most debt in Chile is private debt. The corporate non-financial sector, that is enterprises, equivalent to 101% of GDP. And there, too, there is no major correlation between the level of debt and private investment. That debt can be used to restructure portfolio or other debt. So there is a greater variety of use for that debt. But so we would like to strengthen the relationship between debt and investment. And so from the viewpoint of public debt, we should recall that Chile is one of the countries with the lowest public debt, as the Executive Secretary said, for the region. And today there is room to increase debt, to have a more expansive fiscal policy. But there isn't such a direct correlation between debt and fiscal and growth, or fiscal investment. And also part of this has been used to finance current spending. But major challenge and how to improve and enhance the relationship between the greater debt and greater investment. We believe that for that we need policies that aim in that direction specifically. Well, thank you, Daniel Titelman, Director of the Division of Economic Development of ECLAC. And also we'd like to reiterate to all of you our thanks for having accompanied us during this launch, and remind you that all materials related to this preliminary overview are already available on the ECLAC platforms, and we are of course at your service here in Santiago and the rest of the region in order to channel your concerns. We have a press room on this preliminary overview. Executive Secretary, dear colleagues, thank you very much for being with us here today, and all of you, we wish you a very nice afternoon. Thank you.